From the 1980s to the 1990s, the drug epidemic cost millions of lives and billions of dollars. The use of crack cocaine exploded on the streets of South Central Los Angeles, increasing violence and crime all over the city. The incarceration rate increased as the homicide rate grew exponentially. The decade of dreams actually began over 40 years ago with Pastor Tommy Barnett to reach the lost and broken of Los Angeles. This dream flowed over into a young man named Matthew Barnett.
It's not about us, it's about helping others while you hurt.
Who wanted to love and serve people who were hurting.
Jesus was the example of this. Whenever the pain was strongest in Jesus' life, he served the most.
Matthew noticed the old, vacant Queen of Angels Hospital in Echo Park, and he saw his father's dream could become a reality. This was only the beginning. Welcome to the Dream Center.
Hello, I'm Pastor Matthew Barnett of the Los Angeles Dream Center. I am standing on top of the roof here at this facility in downtown Los Angeles, the old Queen of Angels Hospital, where every day on this massive campus, hundreds of lives are being restored every single day. When I was 20 years of age, I came to LA and I thought I was going to be a traditional pastor, pastoring a traditional church and showing up on Sunday morning and doing the best I could to deliver messages to my crowd. But when I came to LA, I realized that God didn't call me to Los Angeles to be a pastor. He called me to be a city janitor, to walk through the streets of LA, to pick up broken pieces and tell people they can dream again. Well, in the last 23 years, we've seen it all. Homeless families, trafficking victims, broken lives, people from every possible situation, from living under the bridges of LA to living on Skid Row, come into the house of God and to see their life totally transformed on a day-by-day, hourly basis. And you are gonna see today, once again, an incredible demonstration of what takes place in the lives of people as we move forward at the Dream Center. The Dream Center offers free programs and resources for men, women, children who are in need of a second chance. We have our Discipleship Recovery Program, which is a residential program providing free housing, education, and discipleship for 240 men and women who have escaped prostitution, drug and alcohol addictions, homelessness, gangs, abuse, and neglect. Today, we believe that the story that you're about to watch will inspire you to make a difference in someone else's life. The stories of redemption, restoration we encounter at the Dream Center reveal the power and the love of Jesus Christ. And because of people like you, we are transforming lives and sending you these inspirational stories of hope. Please help us in continuing to make a difference. Kelly grew up in a Christian home. However, she felt that her family seemed one way at church and another way at home. When a tragedy happened to one of her parents, she became bitter and angry. Instead of turning to God and others for help, she went down a dark road that nobody could ever imagine. Please listen as Kelly shares her story.
My name is Kelly Jaynes. I was born in Santa Cruz County. I am 33 years old. When I was a child, I remember going to church consistently every Sunday, every Wednesday. Growing up in a Christian home, I felt forced to go to church. So it wasn't my decision. I didn't necessarily like it. It was just a routine for me. My parents were very heavily involved in ministry. I'm very, very close to my dad. I'm a daddy's girl. My mom and me have a more complicated relationship. My mom had severe depression. She had a lot of issues in her life that led to this depression. And I never understood how God could allow her to be so miserable, crying and yelling. Our household was on edge a lot. She was triggered, and sometimes she would snap and yell, and it was traumatizing at times. When I was 11 years old, my mom tried to commit suicide. It was a really hard time for my family. My dad actually found her when he came home from work. She had to go away for a little while to get help, to get healing. And when she came back, I saw a difference in her. I definitely saw a difference. I was so bitter. I was so angry at her. I did not understand why a mother would want to take her life. So I felt really, really rejected. I had a lot of rejection issues. I was very bitter and angry at God. Because of a lot of my rejection issues and because a lot of the emotions that came up with being so young and knowing that happened to my mother, I became very sexually active. So I was sleeping around when I was 13. I was introduced to meth at 15 years old by a boyfriend, an older man that I was dating. I fell in love with the drug. It made me feel alive. It made me feel good. It made me forget about the pain that I was suffering from. And I became severely addicted immediately. I would sneak out every night. I was with multiple men every night. I would, do things sexually for drugs to support my habit. I was still in high school and I managed to still graduate. And in high school, I always knew that my calling was to help people. I knew that. And I was always trying to help my friends and help people, and I just couldn't help myself. I ended up catching a sexually transmitted disease when I was 18 years old. And my parents found out that I was using drugs. And it was a really hard time. I ended up moving out at 18, moved in with a friend. My addiction got worse, stopped going to church, completely turned away from God. I remember when I had the symptoms of I was possibly that I had AIDS. The doctors were concerned. They had to run tests. The test took 4 days, and I remember during those 4 days crying out to God, saying, Lord, if you allow this test to come up negative, I will serve you for the rest of my life. The doctor called me and said I didn't have AIDS. And I promised him I would serve him, and so I went back to church for like a month. But it was only a month. I wasn't ready to serve God at that point in my life. I wasn't ready to give up the addiction. I wasn't ready to give up the lifestyle. I ended up going to college to become a drug and alcohol counselor. My passion was to help people. And in college, I was in the dorms. I got very, very caught up with the college lifestyle of partying and sleeping around, and my addiction got worse. I was actually drinking very heavily in college. Was using ecstasy very heavily, shrooms, acid, drinking. You name it, I was doing it. I found crystal meth again. That became a huge addiction in my life again. Also, during the time that I was in college, I had a best friend that was stripping in strip clubs in San Francisco, which was an hour from my college and where I was living. She made it sound so great to strip and make money. And so one night I went with her and I tried it, and I got involved with stripping in college, which took me down a really dark path. Being raised in a Christian home and knowing about having good morals and living a productive life, I knew I was doing wrong. So I had to use drugs more and more to get through the nights that I was at the strip clubs. I remember one night I wanted drugs so bad, and I called my dad for money for food, but it was really for drugs. And he actually said, come over. I thought I was gonna get money, but he actually put a bag of food outside the door and wouldn't let me in. It got to the point where my parents had to change the locks on their door because I was breaking into their house. There was even one time when my parents were on vacation and I broke in and I stole my mom's jewelry. Some very precious jewelry that really meant a lot to her. Caused my parents a lot of pain. I was living in motels, living in my car. I would let people use my car for drugs, and they would do criminal activity in my car. And I remember always getting pulled over by the police. The police knew my car pretty much. I moved in with my grandfather, and I was very close to my grandparents. And my grandma had passed away when I was a child, and so I was only my grandfather. And it got to the point where I was robbing him. I was stealing money out of his safe and stealing his tools and pawning everything he had in his home that was worth anything. It's one of the reasons why I knew I needed to change. I knew it. I just wasn't able to do it.
Kelly looked like she had the perfect Christian family. But the truth was, there was a lot of pain and problems and brokenness. Everything came undone for Kelly when her mother tried to commit suicide, and Kelly never quite got over the feelings of rejection and abandonment because of that incident. And she began turning to drugs to ease her pain. Things kept spiraling downward, and despite growing up with God and the church in her life, Kelly lost her way. And so often we think that because someone has grown up in the church or with a seemingly perfect family that they're immune to pain, protected from things like drug addiction, depression, or even suicidal thoughts. But the truth is we all have struggles, and who or what we turn to in those dark moments matter tremendously. God knew exactly what was going on with Kelly. He knew she was struggling with acceptance and self-worth issues. And despite the choices Kelly was making in her life, even while going to church, God still stood beside her faithfully. Even when we don't see God, He sees us. Thank you for being here with us today. It is because of your willingness to give and your generosity that the Dream Center is able to do what we do, to help people like Kelly and so many others find freedom in Christ. Maybe you are like Kelly, or maybe you know someone just like her, struggling with addiction or self-worth. You too can come alongside to support a young man or woman, helping them and encouraging them to serve the Lord with his or her life. Will you join us today to help young women like Kelly have a fresh start? Will you help be the change? We can't do this without you. We need you. By supporting the Dream Center, you are providing shelter, counseling, mentoring, education, and a foundation in biblical teachings so that many and others can find hope. Please join us by calling in and supporting a young woman like Kelly. Now let's hear the life-changing conclusion of Kelly's story.
My parents did an intervention. They had been noticing for years that I was back to my old habits. They finally made the decision to approach me with coming to the Dream Center. My parents had been giving money to the Dream Center for years. My mom knew the Dream Center for a long time, and I remember them calling and thanking my parents for donations, and I would be like, what's the Dream Center, you know? And I never thought that I'd be here. So when they came to my grandfather's house, her and my dad, with an application, and my dad cried. He cried and said, "You need help." And I knew I needed help. I was 95 pounds. I hadn't eaten for weeks or slept. And I remember they handed me the application. And I remember filling it out. But I still wasn't ready to change. I still wasn't ready to give up the drug addiction or the lifestyle. I was waiting for a call from my drug dealer. And my phone rang, and I said hello, and it was the Dream Center. And this guy, his name was Christian, and he was in 4th level, and he was the one calling to do phone interviews, and he shared his story with me. And I broke down crying because I knew that I needed to go, and I knew that I needed to change. I entered the program. I remember my parents dropping me off and me going down to the women's floor. And they search your stuff when you go into the program, and I tried to sneak in a carton of cigarettes, and they threw it away. I actually kicked meth for 5 days in the women's home. It was like the worst 5 days of my life. I was irritable, sweating, throwing up. I hadn't slept or eaten for weeks, and so it was really hard for me to adjust to not having drugs. So after I got off of bed rest, which is what you take when you are kicking drugs, I had a very hard time with authority. I had a very hard time with the rules. I would cuss out the leaders and cause scenes and call my parents to come pick me up, and they would say no, and I am so grateful and thankful that they never came and got me. That year was really hard because I had to face real issues that I didn't even know I had. And one of those real issues was my mom. And through the curriculum of the program and through the church services, I started to really deal with rejection and started really healing from the pain that I had suffered at 11. I never dealt with that, never talked about it, never dealt with it at all. And so this was the year to do it, and it was really hard. My first week in the program, I had seen my husband at a chapel service. The men and women do come together and do chapel services together, and I seen him. And I thought he was cute and instantly got distracted. I even wrote him a letter and snuck it to him through an RA. And this whole time I was severely distracted off of me. I was focusing on him. And that was easy for me because I felt like I was in the program, I was pleasing my parents, but I wasn't really dealing with me at that point anymore. And the reason why we have those rules of no dating is because when you're in a relationship, recovery stops. And it did for me. I felt conviction for the first time. I felt it and I knew it was wrong, and I stopped. And I went to the RA that was helping me, and I asked her, I said, we need to stop because I'm not growing. I'm not exceeding. I'm not going forward in my program. And I was sober and I didn't have any excuses. I wasn't on drugs anymore. I was making these bad decisions on my own. In the last phase of our program, you're allowed to have interaction with the men that are in the same level as you. And we started, once again, sneaking around, kissing, holding hands. To me, we weren't having sex, so to me, it wasn't wrong. We talked about leaving the program together, which happens a lot in this program. And I'm so grateful and thankful that we didn't, because we probably wouldn't be together today. I got asked to be a resident advisor, which is a leader in the program. And I was so shocked that they even had asked me, because I was still 1 foot in, 1 foot out. But when I took on that position, I fell in love with it. I fell in love with helping the women and praying with them and encouraging them and even correcting them. And I was able to be the RA that I always wanted in the program. And I knew that sneaking around with Skylar, who is now my husband, was wrong. And so I actually ended up telling on us. In my second year, I actually told my house parents at the time that we were in a relationship and we needed help because we were going to leave together. We actually got talked to and we're told that we were not allowed to have any interaction for a whole year. And it was really hard. And in this second year, I was an RA and falling in love with God, really falling in love with Him. The reason why I made the decision to give up Skylar was I knew I needed to put God first. And I knew that if I kept sneaking around with him, I would lose my job. So in that moment, I put my program, my job, and God before a man, which was very rare for me. I fell in love with God. In that year, I grew so close to God. It was an amazing year. It was a hard year, the hardest year, but it was actually the most amazing year. I had a lot of breakthrough. I graduated the second year program and was able to date my husband. While me and my husband were dating, we actually got offered the position of being the house parents, which is the home directors. And we weren't even engaged yet. We had to pray about it, and obviously we got engaged and got married a year after we dated and took on this new role the day after we got married. On my wedding day, when my dad was walking me down the aisle, I looked at him and I said, "Dad, thank you so much for not letting me come home. When I would call and scream at you to come pick me up, you didn't." And I remember him crying. And it was a really amazing moment for me because I walked down the aisle and God just showed me just everything that I had experienced. And he showed me, this is what you get when you're in obedience. I had made the decision that I wanted to have a child 3 years after we were married. And for me, I felt like I had to choose ministry or having a child because me and my husband, we lived on the women's floor. We had an apartment on the floor. So raising a child on a recovery floor isn't really, I think, the ideal place to raise a child. Me and my husband were actually making plans to leave and transition out of the Dream Center so we can go home and back to his hometown and raise a family. And I didn't feel peace about that. I knew that God was still calling us to the Dream Center. I knew that we were still getting called to run the home. And I remember God speaking to me so clearly one night. I was praying and he said to me, "You're gonna have this child on this floor and I'm going to give you guys strength. And you guys are gonna do this." And I was like, wow. And I got instantly pregnant that month. And my son just turned 4. And we have raised him on the women's floor and am now having to manage being a mother, being a wife, and being a leader. It's been an amazing journey. With God, he just makes life have purpose. I'm now 11 years clean, married with a child, and God has entrusted me, my husband, to run this program, and sometimes it's so real. Sometimes I have to pinch myself because sometimes I feel like I'm living in a dream. I never thought that coming to the program I would ever be the director of the program. I never thought that would ever happen, or be married or have a child, and it's just been an amazing experience, and I'm tired today. Me and my mom have an amazing relationship. God has healed us so much. I thank God every day for the healing and the breakthrough that's taken place in my life, and I'm just honored to be here at the Dream Center. I'm honored that God chose me and my husband to run the women's home. I never take it for granted. I never want to forget where I've come from, and I love working with the women because I'm able to get down to their level and I'm able to relate to them. It's been an amazing experience, individually and as a couple. I'm just excited for what God's going to do next in my life.
Wow, what an amazing story. Her story is like so many of the testimonies we hear every day at the Dream Center. It's one of redemption, of value, of a true testament to the deep love that God has for each and every one of us. I'm constantly inspired by how God transformed lives here, bringing people from their darkest places of life, restoring them, and putting them into a positions of service and usefulness and leadership. Kelly had grown dependent on drugs and relationships to give her the high and the validation, but when she finally gave in to God, she was able to truly find the acceptance and self-worth she had been looking for all along. That's what our God can do. God knows all of us so well. God wants to take all of us out of our brokenness and pain, and He wants to give us purpose, and He wants to use you in a powerful way. Even when we don't see God, He sees us. In Psalms 46:5, it says, God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at break of day. In 1 John 4:16, it says, and so we know and rely on the love of God and that He has for us. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God, and God in them. God is always with us. No matter how far we've strayed or the mistakes that we have made in the past, God knows us better than anyone. He accepts us for who we are. He sees us as worthy, and He wants to make us whole. Kelly needed validation, and God was willing to give it to her. She just had to seek Him first. Although Kelly thought that she had to rely on drugs and stripping to survive, really what she needed was God. Your support and prayers have made it possible for Kelly and so many others to get another chance at life. You help us make it possible to serve everyone 24/7 by your gift. Please consider partnering with the Dream Center, becoming a dream builder, dedicated supporter of our organization, changing lives, restoring the broken. In fact, we'd love to invite you to become a part of the Dream Center by seeing the campus and see what your investment is all about. By supporting the Dream Center, you are providing shelter, counseling, mentoring, education, and a foundation in biblical teachings so that many and others can find hope. Thank you for watching, and please join us next week for another powerful story full of hope, transformation. You will continue to see how far your support goes in the lives of others and how far the hand of God can reach to make a difference right here every day at the Dream Center.